Could a court delay be a game changer in the Kenyan elections? You're with Arise News Hour, and that is our lead story. We look at the reaction to a delay in the trial of Uhuru Kenyatta for war crimes at The Hague.
Also in the program, America names Mali Islamic leader as a global terrorist. Iyad Ad-Ghali runs the Ansar al-Din group that's closely linked to Al-Qaeda. And reaction to Bill Clinton's call on Nigeria to use its wealth to help stamp out poverty and Islamic militancy in the north. Plus, forget France. Try the Togo Fizz for this year's Champagne Supernova.
Tonight, Kenya's politicians are assessing the impact of a decision to delay the trial against leading presidential candidate Uhuru Kenyatta and his running mate for war crimes. The International Criminal Court at The Hague says the trial for violence after the 2007 elections might be delayed until August after the defense asked for more time. That leaves Kenyatta free to concentrate on the runoff contest that most observers predict will happen after the first poll next Monday.
And voters in Kenya were threatened with a long, gruesome war today by Somalia's Islamist group Al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab is linked to Al-Qaeda and said Kenya was safer when it ran neighboring southern Somalia. Now, at the same time, it's been nearly 6 years since that outburst of election violence in Kenya, and many of the hundreds of thousands who lost their homes are still living in temporary camps. Will Davis has that story.
108 families live in the Kihoto camp in central Kenya. They moved here after fleeing their homes during the violence that swept the country after the disputed election in December 2007. 1,100 people died as ethnic groups attacked each other. Teresa's home was burnt to the ground and her daughter died a few months after becoming traumatized at what she saw. Kihoto means justice, but there's no sign of that here.
There's very little way of making money here. We have to buy our water for 10 shillings for a jerry can. I was trampled on during the election violence, and I'm still in pain. We have no access to any kind of medical care.
The current government claims most of the tens of thousands of people forced from their homes have now been resettled, but there are actually still hundreds, if not thousands, waiting to be given land or compensation. Some aren't even recognised as internally displaced persons by the government, as they were missed when the registration process was carried out.
The first thing the new government should do is resettle all the IDPs across Kenya. There should no longer be anyone who is called an IDP.
Two of the men accused of orchestrating the violence, William Ruto and Uhuru Kenyatta, who at the last election were sworn enemies, are now running on the same ticket. It is hoped this could stop a repeat of some of the tribal attacks. But if violence does break out, people could once again be forced to flee. Elizabeth Waku belongs to one of 17 families in the Ebenezer camp who are still waiting to be resettled.
If we go back to my home, I can show you who attacked my house. They're still there. If the government wants to know, because they're saying I'm not an IDP, I can take them to the place where I was staying and show them what happened.
All of the IDPs have tales to tell of how they lost their houses, businesses, and even loved ones. They're all hoping that whoever is elected next month will finally deliver them to a place they can call home.
Now, as we look at what is happening with the Kenyan election and the charges against Uhuru Kenyatta, we are joined by our East Africa correspondent, Tom Walsh, who joins us live via Skype from Nairobi. So the International Criminal Court, Tom, made the decision to delay the trial of Kenyatta and his running mate. What do you make of this decision? Could it possibly have been influenced by politics?
Yes, I mean, it's a huge decision and it's a huge turn of events. when the actual elections are only on Monday, only merely days away. It's a big blow for Raila Odinga, who is Uhuru Kenyatta's main opposition and who's neck and neck with Mr. Kenyatta in the poll. He was really hoping that if there was a runoff, which was due for the 10th or 11th of April, which is the same time when Kenyatta was supposed to be seen at The Hague, that Mr. Kenyatta would be out of the country, which would help Mr. Odinga considerably in terms of gaining votes for that next runoff. Now, Mr. Kenyatta is going to be here on the ground. He's going to help muster support again if there is a runoff. Now, whether this was politically motivated, no one, of course, will come out and say yes or no, one way or the other. I think it's a good sign that the International Criminal Court has decided to do this. It takes the pressure off this whole ICC issue for the elections and gives both candidates the ability and time to breathe and kind of see where this election will go.
I wonder, Tom, and I know this is going to be purely speculation, but does it change Kenyatta's position if he faces the ICC as the sitting head of state as opposed to just a candidate for the head of state?
Yeah, of course. It changes things considerably, as a lot of the other candidates who are opposing Uhuru Kenyatta have asked, how on earth can you run a country from The Hague? So it's going to change things considerably. And if he is indicted and he is at The Hague and he is the president at the same time, then also that has repercussions for how Kenya stands in terms of the international community. And they have been quite vocal, the US and the UK specifically, in saying, you know, we will only have absolute necessary contact with ICC indicted suspects, even if he is the next president of Kenya.
Tom, of course, we heard today that voters were threatened with a, quote, long, gruesome war by the Islamist group Al-Shabaab linked to Al-Qaeda. They said that Kenya was safer when they were running it. What's being done to try to quell the threat of violence, both during the election and after when the results come out?
Well, there's been a huge police boost here in Nairobi and across the nation. And now that boost has been made in terms of the elections itself and avoiding any ethnic violence that happened 5 years ago. But of course, that boosted security will also help against this new threat that Al-Shabaab have made. Now, let's be clear, this is not the first time Al-Shabaab has made this kind of threat. They've said that they would use the opportunity of the Kenyan elections and any post-election insecurity or violence for their own needs and to create fear and animosity in the country. So, you know, they have threatened this before. I think the Kenyan security services are very much aware that any kind of insecurity after the elections could be an opening point for Al-Shabaab to come in. So they are taking adequate measures, we've been told.
All right, Tom Walsh joining us live via Skype in Nairobi. Tom, thank you very much. We'll speak to you again soon. Jeff?
Thank you, Debbie. Now, with just 4 days to go until the election, Kenyan authorities are doing everything they can to avoid another outbreak of election frustration. Once again, Tom Walsh, but this time from the Peace Train.
You know, I've always wanted to paint on trains since I was a little kid, since I grew up, you know, knowing how to paint with a spray can.
Say the word graffiti, and the first impression is often vandalism and crime. But here in Kenya, things are a little different. Meet Bankslave, a world-renowned local graffiti artist who's using his skills to promote peace in next week's national elections.
We get to show what good graffiti is. Really, you know, something that is substantial, that can speak to the people rather than be an eyesore. We're using art, us as using art to speak to the people. You know, it just enables them realize that, you know, there are other ways to fight this. You know, you don't have to kill your neighbor.
Bankslave grew up in one of the poorest areas in Nairobi, an informal settlement called Kibera. It's here where some of the worst violence during the 2007-2008 Kenyan elections took place, in which over 1,000 people died and many more were displaced. But it was also here that he met Joel Bergner, a renowned American graffiti artist and volunteer with the Kibera Walls for Peace project, a charity whose aim is to educate the young generation of Kenyans to express themselves creatively through art rather than violence. One of the biggest projects has been dubbed the Graffiti Train, a collaboration between Rift Valley Railways and the charity to turn everyday Kenyan commuter trains into moving works of art promoting peace.
So when you catch people's attention, you have some nice artwork and you do something original, then people pay more attention. And then our ultimate goal of bringing peace will also, they'll also be able to see that message and see also that the youth of Kibera and of Nairobi want that peace, which is just as important as the artwork itself.
The graffiti train is certainly a first for the country, but the mood here in Kenya is tense. And with the national vote merely days away, the question remains, will this message of peace have any real effect? Tom Walsh, Arise News, Nairobi, Kenya.
There's been mixed reaction in Nigeria today to the message from former U.S. President Bill Clinton. Speaking at the 18th annual This Day Awards, he said Africa's second biggest economy must do more to alleviate the extreme poverty across the predominantly Muslim North in order to halt the wave of bombings, shootings, and kidnappings.
You are a country of potential. I would say you have about three big challenges. First of all, like 90% of the countries who have one big resource, you haven't done very well with your oil money. You should have reinvested it in different ways. Now you are at least not wasting the natural gas. You are developing that and sending it in pipelines. You've got to do a better job of managing natural resources. Secondly, you have to somehow bring economic opportunity to the people who don't have it. This is not a problem specific to Nigeria. Almost every place in the world, prosperity is heavily concentrated in and around urban areas. So you have all these political problems and now even violence problems that appear to be rooted in religious differences and all the rhetoric of the Boko Haram and others. But the truth is, the poverty rate in the north is 3 times what it is in the Lagos area. And to deal with that, you have to have both a powerful state and local governments and a national policy that work together. If you just keep trying to divide the pie, if you will, it's a losing strategy. You have to figure out a way to have a strategy that will have shared prosperity.
Now, we have to apologize for the poor audio quality on that soundbite, but that there was former U.S. President Bill Clinton speaking in Abeokuta last night. So, was it a friendly warning, or, as some people are saying, none of his business? Well, Nigerian economist and commentator Bismarck Rewane joins us on the phone now from Nigeria, reacting to former President Clinton's comments. Now, Bismarck, I know there's a split reaction across the board. What did you think of what he had to say?
I think the president was making a constructive criticism of what is pretty obvious, that there is a link and correlation between economic deprivation and poverty and insurgency and militancy.
He
so
does.
The obvious,
yeah. There is some truth to what he's saying, Bismarck. There is some truth because Nigeria is potentially Africa's wealthiest country, all that oil money, which hasn't necessarily been used wisely over the decades. Isn't that right?
I don't think I can jump to that conclusion. It hasn't been used optimally. Not to say that it has been used foolishly, but it has been suboptimal in its resource utilization. It could be done much better. We could perform much better than what we are doing right now. But that is not to say, and I don't think President Clinton did suggest that Nigeria was squandering or actually spending money foolishly.
But let's face it, Bismarck, there's a lot of poverty, especially in northern Nigeria. The resources haven't been distributed equally, if one would say, across the country. Much more poverty in northern Nigeria.
Yes, there's poverty in northern Nigeria and there's poverty everywhere in Nigeria. The reality is that income creation and income distribution are two different things. First and foremost, the question of efficient utilization of resources is an efficiency issue. Distribution is an equity issue, right? And therefore, the equitable distribution of income, which has not actually been created, becomes more difficult to manage. So I agree with you that the economy can be much more efficiently managed. That's no doubt about that. I also agree with you that the income is being distributed inequitably, but that is more out of inefficiency than out of just, I would say, it's a combination of inefficiency, corruption, and to some extent greed.
So bottom line, Bismarck, President Clinton's message was pretty well received. I mean, the comments, though critical, were pretty spot on.
Oh yes, they're spot on. President Clinton is not known to make foolish comments, and he has experience in other markets, so he knows what he's talking about. But the reality wasn't a criticism, it was a suggestion that you need to improve on, one, the way you create wealth, and more importantly, you have to improve on the way you distribute wealth. But you have more to distribute if you create efficiently. So his emphasis was that, look, why don't you be more efficient in the way you actually manage your economy and make it sustainable, environmentally friendly, make it sustainable, and then distribute equitably. Because in fairness, if this income inequality, the number of private jets flying around Nigeria, the number of mansions that are being built, and the lavish and ostentatious lifestyle in the midst of abject poverty, it's a threat to national security.
Absolutely, Bismarck. Thank you so much for your comments. Bismarck Rewane, they're joining us. Actually, he was on Skype, not on the phone. They're from Nigeria. Debbie.
Thank you, Jeff. We continue on to America's brand new Secretary of State, John Kerry, and his first foreign policy tour. In Paris today with his French counterpart, Laurent Fabius, Kerry says he is ready to speed political transition in civil war-torn Syria. Also on the agenda, the continuing conflict in Mali. Kerry's State Department has put the leader of Malian Islamist group Ansar al-Din's leader on its terror list. Arise News' Will Took reports.
Not much is known about the shadowy leader of Islamic extremist group Ansar al-Din. Seen here dressed in white on an internet propaganda video, Iyad Aghali is nicknamed the strategist and helped mastermind the capture of Mali's northern regions. His strong ties with al-Qaeda and continued instigation of extremism in Mali led the US this week to officially designate Ghali as a global terrorist. In a press release, the State Department said there's international resolve to eliminate Ghali's violent activities in Mali and the surrounding region. And those violent activities continue to claim lives. 7 ethnic Tuaregs were killed by a car bomb here in the northern city of Kidal yesterday. Tuaregs say they're being specifically targeted by remaining pockets of Islamic extremists. The Tuaregs were once aligned with Ansar al-Din. They were united by a common enemy, the Malian government that was unseated in the military coup of March 2012. But the Tuaregs, who seek an autonomous secular state, split with Ansar al-Din due to their deep ideological differences. When France's intervention in Mali began, the Tuaregs fought alongside French troops to help oust their former allies, who they've now branded terrorists. Now, Mali's Tuareg inhabitants fear reprisals for their change of allegiance. But they also face hostility from Malians for their initial coalition with the Islamic rebels. This Tuareg man was arrested in Gao for his own safety after locals tried to lynch him for alleged cooperation with Ansar al-Din. It's the continued unease between ethnic Tuaregs and black Malians that threatens to upset the country's tentative progress towards peace. Will Took, Arise News.
Now, it is budget day today in Africa's largest economy. Arguably, given South Africa's problems, one of the more important days of the financial year, no doubt. With that and the day's other main business stories, here, as usual, business and economics editor Michael Wilson. Michael.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Indeed, difficult times. The South African government is under pressure to tackle high unemployment, widespread inequalities, sluggish growth, and a high exposure to Europe's debt problems and wildcat unrest in its essential industries. So in his fourth budget, Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan cut South Africa's growth target this year to 2.7%. He also projected a slightly wider budget deficit due to reduced tax revenue. As a result, the government will cut spending over the next 3 years. This is a very delicate balancing act, and I spoke to our correspondent, Cindy Bishop in Johannesburg, and asked her what Pravin Gordhan managed to achieve this time around.
He managed, Michael, to achieve two things. He was working from a very, very small revenue of 887 billion rand, 16 billion rand short of the estimated amount. But he managed to achieve to spread across all the money that he have towards areas that actually need funding, and also to not to increase taxes as was expected because of the economic growth, the shrinking economic growth. The analysts and economists had expected that he would introduce some tax measures, increase taxes, but he didn't do that. Instead, he worked with a very, very limited amount and managed to even save taxpayers about 7 billion rand.
What about businesses? What have they come away thinking from the speech?
Business feel very positive. They feel very positive because he stressed the government working together with business to improve the economy. He stressed actually making the environment for operating in South Africa very harmonious, very business friendly. And he said they will be looking at methods in which business can actually look towards operating in Africa, expanding beyond the borders of South Africa into Africa and moving away from traditional markets. And over and above Africa, looking at working closer with the BRICS countries, China, Brazil and India, making sure that they tighten up their trading agreements, making sure that they expand economic growth and sharing ideas on how to do that. There will be a summit that will be held here next month where there will be much more light into sharing of how they're going to be working together with China, Brazil and India in order to expand trade with those countries. But business is very happy that there hasn't been any tax increases. The tax environment is going to, or rather negotiating tax incentives and negotiating what kind of tax should be paid in this country. There's a committee that will be reviewing the entire tax system of this country.
Cindy Bishop, thank you very much indeed. And the markets, South African stocks dropped in Lagos, a positive reaction all round after President Goodluck Jonathan finally approved Nigeria's 2013 budget after a 2-month delay. Stocks in Nairobi rose slightly too. In currencies, the rand extended its decline after the budget. $1 buys you R8.87. The naira also fell to 158 against the dollar. The Kenyan shilling was the only real gainer today, rising to a 6-week high as foreigners, now get this, are buying into the country just 6 days before that crucial vote you've been hearing about. Brent crude gained a little, marking a steady climb from its weakest level in more than a month yesterday. Gold fell after 4 sessions of gains, heading for the longest run of monthly losses since '97, as mounting confidence that economies are recovering curbed demand for a protection of wealth, which gold normally provides. That's business for now. Still to come, beer drinkers taking Budweiser to court. The company is accused of watering it down. And speaking of water and down, your chance to take a trip on the new Titanic. Yeah. Got to have the money, though.
Can't wait to hear more from that about that. We'll see you later. Thank you, Michael. Well, it's barely been 2 months since Washington was brought to a standstill over the fiscal cliff. And now the U.S. Capitol is locked in yet another budget battle. If politicians don't find a compromise by this Friday, billions of dollars of spending cuts will kick in, affecting everything from teachers' salaries to funding for national parks. Arise News' Heather Scott has the details.
Congress is up against the clock to avert a series of sweeping spending cuts known as the sequester. Well, that's scheduled to take effect on March the 1st, which is this Friday. If the axe drops, Washington would have to trim $85 billion this year and $1.2 trillion over the next decade. That funding squeeze would impact all 50 states and affect nearly every section of the population. Half those cuts would hit defence spending, the rest will be spread over other federal agencies. Hundreds of thousands of public sector workers are likely to lose their jobs. School vaccinations, air traffic controllers, national parks, border control and meals for the elderly are all at risk. Although the sequester won't be felt immediately next week, the cuts will gradually ramp up in the coming months. But with just 3 days left to hammer out a deal, there's still no sign of a compromise on Capitol Hill. The Democrats want to replace part of the cuts with putting taxes up, but that's being met with strong resistance from the Republicans who oppose tax hikes. Speaking in Virginia yesterday, President Obama warned that the deadlock was putting the U.S.'s economic recovery in jeopardy.
So these cuts are wrong. They're not smart. They're not fair. They're a self-inflicted wound that doesn't have to happen. Now, the reason that we're even thinking about this sequester is because people are rightly concerned about the deficit and the debt. But there's a sensible way of doing things, and there's a dumb way of doing things.
But I don't think the president's focus.
But senior Republicans have attacked the president, saying he hasn't done enough to find common ground between both parties.
For 16 months, the president's been traveling all over the country, holding rallies instead of sitting down with Senate leaders in order to try to forge an agreement over there in order to move a bill. We have moved a bill in the House twice. We should not have to move a third bill before the Senate gets off their ass and begins to do something.
As the world's largest economy, a slowdown in the US would have far-reaching repercussions. As the saying goes, when America sneezes, everyone catches a cold. Heather Scott, Arise News.
And Arise News' correspondent Colin Campbell joins us now from Washington, D.C. with more on the sequester. Colin, it seems that we go through this political game of chicken every time. The two sides are very far apart. However, we're less than 2 days away from the deadline. When do you expect we'll start to begin to hear words of compromise?
Good evening, Debbie. Well, remains to be seen. A lot of people think that it may come down to the wire, but a lot of Americans seem to be growing tired of this last-minute budget negotiations or negotiations altogether. And you can hear the frustration on both sides, from the president and from Republicans. John Boehner, the House Speaker, using some choice words there that were also talked about in the headlines this week in referring to his Democratic colleagues and trying to formulate a compromise over this budget debate. Now, this is something that people expect we'll hear more about on Friday as more of these furloughs loom and these layoffs loom, and people will really start to feel the effects once the sequester really starts to take place. We're expected to see a lot of these changes happen over the next several months, up until about September when the fiscal year ends. And this is when people are will start to feel the crisis a little bit, and we'll probably see a little bit more motivation from politicians. As we've seen this week and last week, the president and the Obama administration has taken a lot of people from their cabinet and a lot of lawmakers to try to push this out to the public and try to express the seriousness of the sequester. We'll see if the effects really take place this Friday when the sequester is officially supposed to take place.
Yeah, well, we will see indeed. Let's move on to the brand new Secretary of Defense, just sworn in, Chuck Hagel. What can we expect from him?
Well, there was a lot of political posturing going on there, hasn't there, in the past couple of weeks as they were trying to put Hagel through the ringer before he was officially confirmed. Well, now that he's confirmed, Hagel says that he's going to build strong relations with other nations. He's going to continue strengthening the relationship with allies, and he's going to try to support the Pentagon workforce, as we know will be affected by the sequester if it does take place. So these are things that Hagel says he wants to do during his tenure, and this is something that he'll have to do with the help of Republicans who really tried to put him under the stresses during his confirmation hearings. What's odd is that Republicans now say that he will have to mend fences with them after they really tried to make things a little bit more difficult through his confirmation hearings. But he says he's ready to do that, and he's ready to move on, and as well as promoting the U.S.'s foreign policy in a positive light.
And let's talk about John Kerry, the Secretary of State. He has said publicly that he believes the U.S. should support the Syrian rebels in a tangible way. Uh-oh, and it looks like we have lost Colin. I'm so sorry about that. We'll get the answer to that question a little bit later on. All right, let's move on then. French champagne makers have long insisted that the soil, sunshine, and humidity near the town of Epernay are the only conditions under which to make real champagne. But as Arise News' Jason Mansoret reports, tell that to Togo.
After years of research in this unlikely-looking lab, in this nondescript beaker, Togolese researchers have made what they're calling local champagne.
À la suite des travaux de recherche, on a pu mettre au point premier.
After extensive research, we were able to develop a new product which can be described as a sparkling palm wine. But we thought that it would be great if we could take it to the next level and come up with a champagne that has nutritional and health values. This led us to create our own champagne, which can be compared to any other types of champagnes that can be found on the market, and we named our champagne De Hachamp.
The French might not approve. Togolese bubblies made from palm wine, not grapes, and the palm trees are locally grown.
We cut the palm trees that are automatically replaced with new palm trees, and we extract the wine used to make champagne. We are very proud of it.
But like real champagne, Togolese bubbly is not cheap. A single bottle will sell for about $45 US. Jason Mansoret, Arise News.
You're with Arise News Hour, a recap of our main stories. One of Kenya's leading presidential candidates, Uhuru Kenyatta, will not now face trial at The Hague for several months. It's being seen as a chance for him and his running mate to concentrate on the likely runoff vote, which will take place in April. Mali's Islamic leader Iyad Ghali has been named by the Americans as a global terrorist. His organization Ansar al-Din is linked to Al-Qaeda. And after 19 people died in one of the world's worst balloon accidents at Luxor in Egypt, an inquiry has been started and all hot air balloon flights are grounded.
Also in tonight's program, Balotelli in sport. Mario Balotelli, too good for this world? So he's commissioned a statue of himself.
As we mentioned in the headlines, an inquiry has been launched into what has been described as the worst hot air accident ever. 19 people died in the balloon crash near Luxor in Egypt. Arise News' Jerome Evans reports.
Dawn over Luxor. A bang. And the balloon plummets 1,000 feet to the ground. At least 19 people, most of them Asian and European tourists, died in the crash on Tuesday morning. The balloon caught fire and hit the ground near the ancient Egyptian town of Luxor after a mid-air gas explosion. One Egyptian was killed in the accident, as well as nationals from Japan, China, France, Britain and Hungary. The pilot survived by jumping from the basket. He's being treated in hospital. Condolences have poured in from around the world for victims of the crash.
Our main concerns at this time are with the people who suffered such a tragic loss yesterday, and our deepest thoughts and condolences go out to them and their families of everybody that was affected by this accident yesterday.
Unconfirmed reports say this is the second crash Sky Cruise has had in 18 months. Foreign officials have demanded an investigation.
The government dispatched 3 embassy staff members to the site who are now confirming the identities of the victims. The ambassador to Egypt, Okuda, also submitted requests to the governor of Luxor for a thorough investigation into the incident, as well as measures to prevent further recurrence.
Hot air ballooning at dawn is popular with tourists who are a mainstay of the Egyptian economy. Numbers have fallen since the 2011 uprising that toppled President Hosni Mubarak. This has been a tragic loss of life for many, and potentially a loss of much-needed revenue for a country in recession. Jerome Evans, Arise News.
It is 25 before the hour, and you are watching the News Hour here on Arise. Now it's time for a roundup of the other stories making the news today. Police in the Indian city of Calcutta are investigating the fire that tore through this tower block. 19 people died in the blaze. That's believed to have started in illegal shops housed in the building. Authorities are warning the death toll could rise higher. Iran and 6 world powers have ended 2 days of talks on Tehran's nuclear program. Officials from Iran, the U.S., China, and Europe held meetings in the Kazakh city of Almaty. Iran's chief negotiator was upbeat about the discussions, saying they had reached a, quote, turning point. The group has agreed to sit down again in a few weeks' time. And 6 people have been injured in a suicide bomb attack in Kabul, which targeted a bus carrying Afghan army personnel. It comes just hours after insurgents shot dead 10 police and 7 civilians in eastern Afghanistan. The Taliban is stepping up attacks on Afghan forces as they prepare to take over from the withdrawing NATO troops next year.
Now, a Somali court has delayed its decision on whether a journalist should be jailed for up to a year for interviewing a woman who says government soldiers raped her. The woman was also jailed. A decision on the journalist's appeal was expected today. It is now scheduled for Sunday instead. The case has attracted outrage from human rights groups and called attention to changing attitudes towards women in Somalia.
Sarah never thought she'd be driving through her hometown. Just a few years ago, the thought of a woman cruising along Mogadishu's highways was inconceivable. Such was the control exerted by the Al-Qaeda-linked extremists Al-Shabaab, who controlled the city and banned women from being behind the wheel.
What we were looking for was to get a government making change. We saw the change, so we returned home. I've been here for 6 months. I can't believe I'm driving a car with my own hands, travelling through the town without armed guards and dressed smartly touring my city.
It's nearly 2 years since Al-Shabaab were forced out of the Somali capital, and life for Mogadishu's women has changed beyond recognition. At this beauty salon, women can openly get henna painted and their hair done. Although some beauty shops operated when the Shabaab controlled this part of the city, they had to do so discreetly, and the women were often threatened.
Our business is now very good. We are very happy. Our beauty salon is recruiting more young women for the work. The new employees are also very happy.
But there's still a long way to go until women are treated equally. When one told a journalist she'd been raped, instead of police looking for her attacker, they arrested and jailed her. And women's groups say that attacks are still happening, and often.
It seems to us the verdict against the rape victim is an injustice, because there are millions of women whose rights are violated, raped, killed, made to suffer, and they can't talk. They're silent.
Day by day, things are slowly improving for Mogadishu's women, but the fight is far from over. Sarah Head, Arise News.
And we've reached the time for our business news. Our economics and business editor, Michael Wilson, is here with all the good stuff.
Thanks, Debbie. Yes, a slightly lower start for stocks on Wall Street ahead of a report on the housing market and another day of testimony from the Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke on the economic stimulus programme. For more from the US, let's cross live to our correspondent, Chitra Norbak in New York. Chitra, good afternoon to you. What exactly is Ben Bernanke saying? Is he pleasing the markets? They seemed to come out quite positive yesterday.
Michael, good afternoon to you. The Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke, he is meeting with Congress, and what he's saying is that the U.S. Central Bank will continue to buy assets to stimulate the economy. They will continue to buy about $85 billion in bonds each month, and what this does is it injects money into the economy, it keeps interest rates low, and this hopefully spurs job growth. The markets are reacting positively, as before there was fear that the Fed would stop buying bonds too soon. The U.S. Central Bank, they want to keep buying bonds until the unemployment rate drops to about 6.5%.
Now, not much comfort there, really, for the people at JP Morgan Chase are losing their jobs. How many are going, do you think?
Michael, very true statement. About 17,000 jobs JP Morgan Chase will cut this year as well as next, and they're also cutting about $1 billion in costs. The job cuts are coming from the consumer banking unit, particularly the mortgages and the retail branches area. And what's happening is JP Morgan Chase, like other banks, they are hurting because of the low interest rate environment. That's causing them to earn low margins on loans and investments. Other banks are cutting jobs right now, like Citibank and Goldman Sachs. So this is a bit of a recurring theme that we're seeing in the banking industry right now.
OK, now I know that Americans are a sober lot, but your booze stuff's getting ridiculous, isn't it? First it was watering down Maker's Mark, now it's Budweiser. What on earth is going on?
Michael, Anheuser-Busch InBev is being sued for allegedly overstating the amount of alcohol in their Budweiser beer. And this is the world's largest brewer, and they're under attack for adding water to the alcohol so that the alcohol has less alcoholic content than what the label says. The company maintains that they're complying with all alcohol labeling laws. Customers in about 3 states are suing right now, and they're looking for about $5 million in damages. More lawsuits are to come, so we're not sure if we'll see a Budweiser revolt soon.
Stick to martini, Chitra. That's usually OK. Thanks so much indeed. Now, with little to concentrate on, European stocks were choppy. One investment company told us they've always suspected some consolidation and are staying well into equities. You're seeing the American markets there, but it's whole truths for that too. Of course, all this could change tomorrow, which of course it will. That's why I'm here. Now, euro and also bond prices steadied after a solid demand of Italian government debt helped calm fears over the election stalemate. But there were signs that most of the buyers were Italian institutions and foreign buyers stayed away. So more uncertainty on the cards. Now, if you've made a bit of money in the markets recently, you might like to treat the family to a cruise. However, this one may require a slight sense of humour. An Australian billionaire is building a modern-day version of the Titanic. The Titanic 2 will be updated with air conditioning and other amenities, but other than that, it's going to be a faithful reconstruction, complete with passenger outfits. As it says, food from 1912. That was slightly off by now. Let's say it was refrigerated. Anyway, that was the year the original Titanic sank, as you know. It's even setting sail from, how spooky is this, the same sport, that's Southampton, England, and following the same route to New York. The ship's being built in China in preparation for its 2016 maiden voyage. Its owner, Clive Palmer, who became a billionaire in property, minerals and shipping, says he hopes the Titanic 2 will become a romantic destination for couples. It's rumoured to be costing him £330 million.
I'm funding this myself because I want to spend the money I've got before I die, you know? Which is a reasonable proposition. If you work hard for 40% or 50% of your life, you may as well spend it, not leave it to the kids to spend. There'll be enough left for them anyway. So I'm sure we've got more than the adequate financial capacity to complete this ship. This ship has so far had 40,000 people register on our websites for tickets, and we've had 16 people that have offered to pay more than $750,000 to $1 million per cabin.
I'm told that one of the investors went up to him and said, I hope the project goes down well.
Oh, that's terrible. I was just going to say, who wants to go on this?
Well, quite. And I mean, you know, what the culminating moment, I mean, can't happen, can it? You get to New York and you think, well, it's fine, didn't sink, so I want my money back. You know, what would you do? I mean, but it's a lot of money. Actually, not maybe as mad as those people paying, I think it's $200,000. I mean, it's $200,000 to go on Branson's, galactic trip.
Oh,
I mean, that's a lot to be a pioneer on that. Well, it doesn't even go into space, it goes into subspace.
Right.
It's a sort of basement bit of space, not the top bit, I mean, it's bad, isn't it?
Like $500 million US.
Yeah, I know. You wouldn't do it, would you?
Michael.
Are you that kind of risk taker? We know you have the money.
Yeah, right, but I got better things to do with that kind of money.
I can see him in a captain's uniform calling up the crow's nest and saying, are we taking on more ice for the martini? What's going on?
All right, very good, Michael. Thank you.
Don't go too far. There's a story about Balotelli in the sports. Don't go too far. I know you like this. Now, sports now. Barcelona were humiliated by Real Madrid last night in the Copa del Rey semi-final. Cristiano Ronaldo scored twice to send Barca out of the competition. Barcelona fans looked anything but impressed with their side's 3-1 defeat to their rivals. The home fans, though, don't have too long to wait for the next encounter. Barcelona face Real Madrid on Saturday in the league. Thousands of Swansea City fans have braved the cold weather to welcome home their League Cup winning heroes on an open-top bus parade. The Swans beat Bradford City 5-0 in Sunday's Capital One final at Wembley. It gave them their first major trophy win and a place in Europe. In tennis, Thomas Berdych of the Czech Republic beat Germany's Tobias Kamke 7-5, 6-1 to advance to the quarterfinals of the duty-free tennis championships in Dubai. Meanwhile, Juan Martín del Potro of Argentina defeated India's Somdev Devanam 6-4, 6-4 in another second-round match. World ranked number 7 now faces Germany's Daniel Brands in the quarterfinals.
Way to go with all those names, Jeff. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Now, there are some famous people around the world who've been immortalized into eternity in the form of statues. Abraham Lincoln sits proudly over Washington, D.C. Jesus Christ looks over Rio de Janeiro as Christ the Redeemer. And right here in London, Nelson's column stands tall over Trafalgar Square. But here's one person you probably won't be adding to this list. That's right. It's the ever-controversial Italian striker Mario Balotelli. The AC Milan player has taken his self-admiration to a whole new level. He's ordered a life-size statue of himself. But fear not, people of Italy, you won't be seeing it next to the Vatican or outside the Colosseums, for that matter. Balotelli has decided to put his life-size sculpture right outside his home, which probably is the right place to put it.
You can't make this stuff up.
You really can't. And that falls under the category of too much money.
Too much money. Michael.
He's completely loony. I mean, he's got a Genghis Khan quote across his chest, which is so long I can't even remember what it is.
Yeah.
But
Why
also,
always me?
That was a good one. That was the T-shirt that came up, wasn't it, when he scored against Man United?
Yeah.
But he's actually allergic to grass, which must be a bit of a problem if you're a footballer. I mean, he is, seriously. He can't play on some types of grass.
Interesting.
Why would you pay all that money for somebody like that?
Goodness.
And he's ungovernable. He can't be told anything.
Yeah. But he
he's a great
scores.
player.
Well, here's the question.
He keeps scoring.
Is he going to model for this sculpture? Don't you have to sit or stand, whatever the case may be?
No, what they do is they get a piece of stone, and then they chip away at all the bits that don't look like Balotelli, and what's left is him. It's easy.
I don't even know what to say to that, Michael.
See you later.
Oh.
But if you had enough money, would you erect a statue to yourself?
Oh, come on. Again, like the Australian guy, I have a lot better things to do with my money.
I was wondering if he's going to use the same artist that did the statue that you have. All right, enough of that. You were watching Arise News if you're just joining us.
That's right.
Go ahead.
The coming Winter Olympics in the Russian Black Sea city of Sochi have forced many people to leave their homes.
While most were given compensation, others have received nothing at all. The Mizokov family lost its home, and the region's vice governor of keeping $1 million that was owed to them, Ruben Isi, reports.
Yevgeny spent 20 years of his life here, in a two-storey house, of which nothing remains but some muddy, waterlogged ground. At the end of September last year, local authorities decided to destroy the house, which had been home to 12 people, officially in order to construct a road to ease traffic flow during next year's Winter Olympics. One morning the bulldozers came and flattened it.
Вот здесь находился мой дом, да, мой дом.
This is where my house was, my house. 300 square metres plus 500 square metres of land. An independent surveyor made an estimate. It was around $1 million, but we haven't received 1 kopeck. Why? Because you can see where all the money goes.
Yevgeny accuses the vice governor of the Krasnodar region, which includes Sochi, of not paying the compensation his family was owed. He says local authorities have been using the cover of the Olympics to order unnecessary expulsions of people from their homes and keeping the federal compensation payments for themselves. The vice governor didn't reply to our questions, but local NGOs back up Yevgeny's claim.
We documented cases where residents have not been compensated at all, and cases where they have not been compensated adequately for property they lost.
Yevgeny has also lost his job, a result, he claims, of pressure exerted on his employers by the authorities. It was a hammer blow for a family which had already been uprooted before, when they fled the civil war in Tajikistan in 1991. His parents have found refuge in a small house perched on hills around 15 kilometres outside of Sochi, lent to them by some friends. His father, Alexander, is devastated.
On what basis can they do this? Tell me what was illegal. I built that house. I can't take any more. I've already lost my house in Asia because of the war. Now here it's happening for a third time. I can't come back from this.
The Mazokov family wants to appeal and take their case to the European Court of Human Rights. But they're still waiting for the regional tribunal, which ruled on their eviction, to supply the official documents needed for them to do so.
The Japanese city of Fukushima made headlines in 2011 when its nuclear reactor was compromised by a deadly tsunami. Today, as Heath Cousins reports, Fukushima's spot on the World Cup freestyle circuit is showing the city has another side.
It may not be as famous as Aspen or the Alps, but Japan's Fukushima prefecture is a powder snow paradise. Yet at the Freestyle Ski World Cup, it was about more than just the skiing. This was a chance for people here to show that there's more to Fukushima than its nuclear tragedy 2 years ago.
We want to make sports events more like festivals, where you can drink, get together, and come to Fukushima every year to the event. If we can do that, then we can show people how Fukushima is recovering.
The weather threatened to throw a damper on festivities as winds wreaked havoc. A planned bonfire and fireworks display were cancelled, trains to the venue stopped running, and lifts were shut down. But snowmobiles were brought in to ferry spectators up and down the hill, and cheerleaders led the willing crowd in a round of group exercises to keep warm. For the foreign athletes, the good vibes needed no translation.
Japan's always fun. They make a big deal of the event and they throw a great opening party. And the fans always come out. They're super loud and cheer. They cheer for everyone too. It's not just Japan. They cheer for everyone. It makes it a really good time.
The locals far outnumbered the visitors, especially those from Fukushima Prefecture itself. Mother Yoshie Sakai was there with her 3-year-old, doing something she doesn't do often.
This is one of the relatively low radiation areas in Fukushima. So we're playing a lot outside today. We're outside for once.
People here might still be unable to put the spectre of radiation behind them. But at least this was a chance for them to forget about it for a while and just enjoy themselves, regardless of the weather.
Now, there's been a huge rise in poaching elephants across Africa. Researchers say Africa's elephants could be extinct within a decade. Kenya, by the way, has the best record on the continent for catching poachers. And as Will Davis reports, one of Kenya's most successful programs is retraining poachers to be rangers.
Koyaso often stays up all night. When there's enough light, he heads into the bush. He's been living in the shadows and tracking elephants in this region of northern Kenya for as long as he can remember. Often he'd spend a month following a single elephant in order to do one thing: kill it for its ivory.
Whenever we saw an elephant in the bush, we would stalk it and then shoot it.
After 10 years of hunting, Koyaso's prey has now changed. Along with these Samburu warriors, he's now out to catch the poachers themselves. Untrained and unpaid, they patrol for 2 hours in the early morning and say they have already caught several poachers. Once they've proved themselves, they hope to get jobs with the local wildlife conservancies.
I cannot cope with the poacher's life anymore, because it always ends in death.
In fact, 40 poachers were shot dead in Kenya last year. Wildlife conservancies in this region have teamed up to form a rapid response unit, a heavily armed force They camp out in a different area each night and patrol by foot and 4x4 across the terrain. Well trained, they know where to look for poachers.
Poachers come to the riverbed because all the elephants come here to drink.
Kenya's anti-poaching effort is one of the most successful in East Africa, but still 385 elephants were killed for their tusks in 2012, a dramatic increase on previous years and the highest number since the last poaching crisis in the late 1970s. And in this region, 85% of the elephants that died last year were poached, all driven, say conservationists, by the huge, insatiable demand from China.
Having been through these holocausts before, I have to be optimistic that it can be turned around. And it can be turned around quickly by change in human attitude. And if we can get that amongst the buyers, if they realize the damage they're causing, it could stop. If the buying stops, the killing can too.
There is still a small legal trade in ivory, but it's badly policed, so it provides a cover for traders to offload illegal tusks. Conservationists fear that if the current trend continues, elephants could be extinct in Africa within a decade. They want all trade of ivory stopped, but with high levels of poverty and gun ownership in this region, the rewards for killing an elephant remain a huge temptation for the people here.
They really are such majestic animals.
Yes.
And it's scary because the threat of them being poached to extinction is very, very real.
It is very real, and I've seen them slaughtered. I've seen an elephant in Kenya that has been slaughtered. I mean, they actually mow them down with AK-47 automatic rifles. And then they just go and slice off the tusk. I mean, it's so cruel.
It really is very cruel. And elephants are very close to us in the complexity of their nervous system. They have great memory. They're very, very social. So if one gets poached out of the family, then the family members, they grieve.
Yeah, and they also really linger around them.
That's right. That's right. They, in effect, have a wake.
Correct.
And a ceremony. We're joined by Michael.
What you were saying, Jeff, about Kenya and the record that they have about stopping poaching. How does that work? Do you know? Have you witnessed that?
Once they arrest the poachers, it used to be a shoot-on-sight law.
Brilliant, yeah.
Now they arrest them, and instead of jailing them for 25 years, because the poachers know their way around, they've already mapped out the routes of where the elephants are. So they use the poachers as rangers to go grab other poachers.
Poachers turn gamekeepers, we would say, in lots of ways, which is actually a very good way of doing it. And elephants, they're very, I wouldn't like to sort of face one, without the protection of something or a guide.
They do outweigh you, yes.
But they're very, very loving, aren't they, towards their family, and it's interesting to watch them because they move so slowly, so you get a better view of their affection for the little ones.
Have you guys ever been up close? Have you been?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, but only in a proper, like a land
like a zoo, right?
In a zoo.
In Kenya, there's a sanctuary, an actual sanctuary where you can go and adopt one if you want to. And you can touch it and feed it and go visit it every week.
Bring it home?
For dinner. Can't take it home.
Because they like cakes, don't they? They'd be on that table, wouldn't they, getting the cakes with the trunk? You can see it all, can't you?
I've had the opportunity in covering all the stories that we get to do in this business of visiting. It was the Pittsburgh Zoo in the United States where mother had a brand new baby, and they allowed us to go in the enclosure with the family of elephants. And
she didn't mind?
Right? No, she didn't mind. She didn't mind. And it really was amazing to be so close to them. And they're very, very smart. To watch the mothers teach them, just as a human mother would teach an infant, is just amazing.
What is the pull? Is it because people want the ivory, and as what? I mean, as decoration or as?
There's an aphrodisiac. You've heard about that in the Far East.
Don't they grind it into powder?
Correct.
And put it into food?
Oh, it's horrific what they do.
I mean, you would think that there's some sort of education that you could actually do. That clearly isn't an aphrodisiac because there's no such thing, is there?
No.
I mean, it's madness, isn't it, that it actually happens? And this is China, is it presumably?
Correct.
Yeah.
The Far East. Yeah, all those countries over there. Huge demand, huge.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, our children or their children after that may not get to see the mighty elephant.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'd love to invite our viewers to tweet us about how you feel about the poaching and how it is being approached right there.
That's right. And our handle is @AriseTV. Please
or you can visit us on our website, which is arise.tv.
In the meantime, we'll see you here same time tomorrow. Good night.
Bye-bye.